Welcome to English for Engineers. I'm your host, Olivia Augustine. Join me on my podcast as I dig deep into all things technical English, business English, and international business communication to bring you almost a lifetime of knowledge in digestible format. Hello, friends, fellow engineers, and the occasional word nerd who's listening in. Today, I have a very special guest with me from one of the areas of the world with the best accent, I think. I just love the Australian accent. I want to introduce you guys to my guest today, Becky Paroz. And with 30 years in the construction industry, Becky has demonstrated her leadership skills on some of the most demanding projects in Australia. Becky is an engineer, she's a project manager and a director in 3 companies. And as if that wouldn't be enough to fill one's day to the brim, she's also a professional mentor, forming the next generation of industry leaders. And she has awards to prove that. For example, the Fearless Educator Award of 2019. Becky, so great to have you here. Thank you for coming and recording with me. That's awesome.
Hi, Olivia and audience. It's fabulous to be here, a fellow engineer to talk about all things word nerds. It's fantastic. I'm a bit paranoid about my accent now, whether I'm showing it enough, but I can maybe chuck something Aussie in, or talk about one time with a kangaroo on site. But no, it's always fun to talk to people around the world in the industry with similar experiences and diving deep into the language we use, because we have such a plethora of jargon. There's a phrase for you. It's good fun. Thanks for having me.
Do you want to tell us a bit more about your background, what you did in those 30 years, your educational background, how you ended up doing what you're doing now?
Sure. I did technical drawing, so drafts person would be the current phrase, encompassing what I did in high school. And I was good at the maths and science. So when it came to the career, I was looking for big bucks and experiences and sort of things to get me away from the home environment, which was not very happy. And I got steered towards engineering. And I don't really know if the guidance counsellor just saw my potential, if that was the start of the very early drive to get some women in STEM, but it was kind of the making of me. I kind of went there and went, oh, this is interesting. It's challenging. It's got, back to basic concepts of how the universe building blocks go together and then how actual building blocks go together. And it really fired my imagination. And obviously I haven't looked back. So I studied and I've worked in all sorts of different roles to get the full, engineering, building, construction experience. A lot of engineers get really stuck in just the engineering, but there's so much more to the industry of construction and the business of construction. And so, my journey has been a bit of a snake through a variety of roles, which I do believe has made me a much better, well-rounded and more adaptable project manager, because I've experienced the projects from various elements, not just the one channel. So I've done 15 years or so as QA, quality assurance management, QAM, got on ISO 9001 for those who like the numbers. And I loved that because I've learned about so many things. I did 6 months engineering, electrical study, and 6 months mechanical study, and ended up on civil just to kind of complete the degree, because I realized by then I didn't really want to do engineering. It was the business I wanted to be in. And so getting into QA, I got to learn all about pipelines and welding and fire alarms and all this stuff that you don't get exposed to as an engineer and learning about engineering, and certainly don't necessarily get exposed to if you have that very linear engineering path. And so it just fed my curiosity for stuff. Like, I probably know more about doors than I ever really wanted to. And how to install them and how important they are and how they meet code and building legislation and deed 1.2 of the BCC, which is the Building Code of Australia. Um, but at the same time, it's all knowledge and it's all fascinating and it all has relevance. And so it just really fed me for a long time. And again, having that interaction, I suppose, at that level and that kind of, quality assurance made me realize how important it is and how undersold it is, because when your product is wrong, how on earth can you expect anything to go right? And I'm kind of getting talking about product because I know that's going to sort of segue into where you're going to take us on this journey. And it really, like, if you think about it, if you don't have the right foundation, your building won't stand up. If you don't have the right road, your cars won't be as safe. If you don't have the right steel, your building can suffer from earthquakes and other type of interactions with nature that can cause it to fail much sooner and be far more costly, not only in terms of infrastructure, but human life. And so, this is all the stuff that just kind of really fires me and keeps me interested in the game.
Wow. Really cool. So you really have a well-rounded, I don't know if the word education is the right word, but you took it all in. And
yes.
there are no rough edges anymore.
Look, I'm a construction girl. There's rough edges, and we'll try not to demonstrate that through the use of language here today. And hopefully those construction words don't pop out.
I love the rough edges personality-wise, but knowledge-wise, I think you're super polished.
I do. Thank you. And I do. So I guess it's a point of pride, particularly as a female in the industry, to be right. Not only is it a personal like, it's very satisfying when I'm in those sort of, big boardroom arguments and the boys with their big pants think they're always right, to kind of have that moment of, oh, the girl got it. It's satisfying.
It is. Yeah, totally. I know that. And I mean, I think the last 30 years, a lot has changed, but it's still a bit more fighting for us than for our dear male counterparts.
I think we've come a long way, but there is definitely further to go.
Yeah, probably shouldn't say there's more fighting for us, and I shouldn't include myself as I'm not actively in the industry anymore. But you're
still supporting the industry, and I think that's still inspirational for other women to come in there. So I think there's a place for us all to be supportive, no matter. Yeah, and no matter sort of what role we fulfill, because they're all important. Yeah.
And I'm still addicted to the smell. Whenever I walk along a building site, I'm like sniffing in the concrete and the dirt smell, and I'm like, oh, I kind of miss it.
Yes, there is a certain atmosphere you do get used to after a while, and it's that machines and dirt and beeping and hustle, and there's nothing else like it than being in the middle of a busy site.
And that super satisfied feeling when a project is done. Like there is a project, that building, there's something that you can show off, that there's something in your hand, you can touch it. It's just some real stuff.
From this hole in the ground or this dirt patch remote comes this thing that employs people and engages people and gives life to something, whether it be a building or a shopping center or an operational production facility. It is.
It's a thing that does other things, and it's cool. It touches so many people you will never meet, you will never know them, and it's how many people literally cross a bridge that you've planned or built or designed? It's
and that's kind of exciting to think of, is that was something I was a part of.
That's for me the alluring part of engineering.
Very much so.
But as if it's best case, a lot of engineers listening to the podcast who don't need to tell them how cool the job is, because they know
exactly.
That's why they pick them. But there's something else that we tech people struggle sometimes, and that's language, because we're so focused on numbers and drawings. And you told me that because you were in Q&A and you did a lot of international procurement, and you were dealing with documents all your professional life. And you told me that a lot of documents were, because you had international projects, they were translated into English. And then you got that sometimes poorly translated documents and you had to translate them into real English. Can you tell us a little bit more? What were the challenges? How did you go with that? How did you do that?
Look, it's one of those unique things that while Australia speaks English, we don't actually speak a lot of other languages. You know, we're very limited in what we learn in school, and I know that's opening up more these days. But you know, I did basic French, so I can actually read some French. But we're very limited, whereas you guys learn, you know, 4 languages before you start school, kind of thing, over in the European countries, and English being one of them. So we'd often get kind of the, you know, the user manual, the tech specs, the operational manual, the assemblies, all were in translated English. So we didn't. How you could tell that was it didn't flow. So when you read a book, the sentences flow and you're kind of not thrown out. When you're reading translated documents, there's words that go around the wrong way, or there's literal translations that kind of don't match the text. And I'm trying to think of some examples, and hopefully some will come to me as I kind of go through. But you'd get, you know, that it would be almost Yoda-like, you know, instead of to assemble this, you know, choose piece A and piece B and connect with screw 1. You know, they'd come out a bit Yoda-esque, and screw 1 will be used for part A to connect part B. And so while that makes sense in some fashion, what
but the moment you read it, you wish for some drawing to explain it, like a simple error, and make it easy.
Look, we're engineers. Pictures, drafting, plans, lay it out. And sometimes these companies wouldn't do that. So you'd be sitting with these parts. You'd have a list of the parts. So you'd have to work out, okay, is that part A and part B? And so the potential for issues, as you can see from that, is fairly high. And obviously, you know, as engineers, it's up to us to get the assembly right, because then the part works properly and then the whole thing works properly. And that's the whole idea. So, you know, it used to be fun to kind of get a group together of, you know, the engineer that sort of signed off on the part, the guy in the field, the labourer or the techie who's going to assemble it, me as the QA, the safety guy, because, you know, no one's ever seen this part before, so he needs to kind of do a bit of safety review. And then, you know, someone in charge who just needs to sit there to feel like they're, you know, going to be supportive or important, or both. And then kind of decode this document. And so as QA, part of my job is to then get that into what we would call a process. So I would document the process and turn that into something that then everybody could follow, should we have something that's going to be a repeatable experience. You know, things like pipeline. Once you've kind of slotted one concrete joint into another concrete joint and done your weld on it, and that's often with a poly weld, and then done a seal and then coated it, that process is then something you repeat on a pipeline. When you're doing things like, say, a sewage treatment station, a water treatment plant, that sort of thing, some of it's repeatable, but it's not then repeatable again until you go build another one. So a lot can be lost from the knowledge that you gather with that team if you don't capture it properly. Mm-hmm. And so that was a big part of my role in QA, is capturing a lot of this stuff, lessons learned, the understanding, proper documentation, kind of using that awkward translation and turning into something that, you know, a tradie, and our tradies often they're not university educated, they're very, very good with their hands, very good with tools, but they're not necessarily readers. So they don't want, you know, the document that's 3 or 4 inches thick. They want a 2 or 3 page document. They can go do A, do B, do C, and at the end go, here's exactly what you need, and it's right. Do you think, really fascinating.
Yeah. Do you think that those wonky documents, that it was some Google translation, or that it was just a translator who wasn't used to technical translations, or it was a tech person, but their English wasn't that good?
I think a combination of all of the above. Like, remember, 30 years. So there is times and documents that are pre-Google translation. So we're talking, they've paid someone to translate the document. And you're right, it's very obvious if they're not technical, because they don't put the jargon in the right spots. They don't use the right tense of the jargon, or just, it's just off. And we as engineers know that even in our own native language, when we're reading something and it's like, yeah, this person actually hasn't ever seen a transonic oscillator, or something like that, subsonic transducer. So it's and then the third one, as you say, is a technical person. So you can understand that the technical is very good, but the wording around it and piecing it together in that sort of process flow is
just
lacking.
Not how native speakers would say it, or how it's used
again. Yeah. So which one I prefer, I don't know. I think the technical, probably, because they get the technical part right, and they put in things like the tolerance, So, if you've got a screw, they will say screw turn 10 times, tighten and then back off, because they know technically that's the information that's actually relevant to that piece. Whereas someone who is translating will kind of look at that and go, oh, why would you say that? People know how to screw it in. So they'll say screw it in until just tight. And that is quite different. And we as engineers know that is quite different. Screwing it in until tight and then backing it off is very different to screwing it until just tight. It's
a really good example, because you can tell if it's a tech person who translated something, or a language person. Let's just call it like that. There are professional terms for it, but I prefer tech person and language person, as I called my cat. It is what it is. Yeah. Oh yeah. So Becky, if you could, do you have a tip, or do you have any method that you wanna, or a tip that you could give? Let's start with native speakers. A tip that you would give native speakers when they're writing documentation or technical documents or reports. What would you tell them? What should they do to make it easily understand for an international team?
I think the first thing is have definitions. Like, one of the things in my procedures, I always have definitions. It doesn't matter what you think you know. When it comes to following a procedure, you want to be very clear of what you do know. So I use definitions on must and should. I put definitions around safety, so and QA. So if I'm talking about tolerances, I will put in there tolerance is a specific QA expectation that the measurement will be within plus or minus 2% to 10%, depending on the criticality of the part. So when I talk about tolerance, that makes it very clear that is exactly what I mean, as opposed to tolerance, which, in normal language and in English language is the ability to put up with stuff. So I think definitions are really critical. And secondary to that is remove the jargon. I kind of have this talk, particularly when I'm mentoring some of the young women and young men I tell them that jargon is something that we come up with to make our industry sound exclusive and more important than sometimes perhaps it is. It's like a club.
So true. It's like a club.
It's the secret language, handshake, all of that. And so jargon helps identify us as a collective and as engineers, but it also helps exclude. Yes. Which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it can be very difficult for young people who are given jargon as a part of their engineering degree, and non-native speakers who haven't developed the jargon that's developed in the local area. And we also are very much known for our jargon. some of it's not quite accurate through the view of movies and things like that. But, we have everything's no worries for us. No worries, no worries, no worries, no worries, no worries. Now, that doesn't mean not to worry. It doesn't mean that everything's perfect. It just means that she'll be right. We'll figure it out. We'll get it sorted. Or, and again, see, I've just used 3 definitions for what that could mean. And so that's where, for non-native speakers, being really clear on definitions and removing that jargon as much as possible. So we don't need to call it the, part XY8, 23, ZY 10+%. We can call it screw A. It's, when it comes to that sort of process and what we're talking about in QA, and put a picture of it. So, that'd be my advice for native speakers.
To cut out the jargon and be more clear,
and
what would
include a definition if you can't cut it in. Yeah,
that's pretty much the definition of inclusive language.
It is, but it's surprising how many people don't think of that, because they're so used to thinking and acting and talking in jargon, they forget that other people don't speak that language. And I mean that tech language, not just that English language. Yeah,
true. And what tip would you give non-native speakers if they are dealing with an international team?
I think double check everything. Double, and not necessarily double check in a minutia, but double check in, okay, this guy said no worries, and I've just asked him a really technical question. Is he telling me not to worry, or is he telling me that he's got it sorted, or is he giving me the brush off and kind of it's no worries, and I actually haven't received the reassurance that I need? I think to being clear that you are trying to learn the language and asking people to slow down and be present with you. I love learning. I normally try and get the guys I've worked with to teach me a swear word or two, a cuss word from their language. It kind of just breaks down the barriers. So
unfortunately, that's the words we remember very fast.
It is, but also it's an instant rapport, because if I see them involved in something, and I can go up and go, is it? How do I do this without using some actual cuss words? It's is it going well or is it not going well in their native language in that short form?
Yeah.
There's an instant rapport. They're like, oh my God, you've used it, you've engaged with me, you've built rapport, you get it, you've used a word I've taught you. There's this nice sharing. And so I think this would be advice too, I suppose, for native speakers, is just allow those cultural differences to be a point of interest and of learning rather than a frustration and block.
Oh, that's gold, yeah.
Because I see so many people, it's oh, give me someone who can speak English. It's well, they can speak English. They just can't speak it as well as you. Maybe take some time and just a little bit of patience, because you're going to be working, especially on projects, you're going to be working with this person for several years. Engaging with them early to help them with English is actually only going to do you a benefit later. And I think learning a couple of their words to kind of, they're not hearing their language. They're not at home being surrounded by this. So I think every now and then just throwing out a word, it doesn't have to be a cuss word, although they're the funnest, but a word from their home just makes them feel a bit more welcome. I went to Holland and I learned "de lekker." It means I like it.
Lekker,
I'm not lekker. Yeah, lekker. Just lekker. It's good. So if I'm with a Dutch person, I can kind of chuck that out. And they're like, "Oh my God, do you speak Dutch?" I'm like, "No, that's the only word I know."
But even if you tell me that you think that something's lekker, it even builds rapport instantly now, because if you compliment my food and you say, "Oh, that's lekker," instead of, "Oh, that's so good," it touches me more, because you making an effort, complimenting my effort. Yeah,
exactly. So, and that way, you become more comfortable with each other, and it just makes for a nicer environment, I think. Yeah. So, yeah.
Something I've learned and experienced myself is, if, like, you're using a Dutch word now, and obviously, of course, it's not 100% perfect pronunciation as a Dutch person would. How could you? But it's pronounced so good that I understand what you mean, which is the most
that's the point. Yeah.
But you not perfectly pronouncing a Dutch word makes me not worry about not perfectly pronouncing an English word.
And
so
there's
you make
another
each other
element.
Yeah. And especially in the work environment, to feel comfortable is necessary to stand your ground sometimes.
Yes. Build that confidence. Be able to, when your gut tells you this isn't quite right, and in the engineering world, when your gut's telling you something's not quite right, that is important. We all know to listen to that. Hang on a minute. Because our brain and our risk practice and all the sort of inputs are telling us, no, we need to stop. Something's going to go bad if we don't. Yeah. And when that language barrier is there, that can be very hard. But if you've built up some rapport and trust and understanding, if I've got an engineer standing there going, no, it's a swear word, I can't use that. But you're telling me like a word that he's taught me that means something very negative. I'm like, I'm going to stop and go, hang on a minute. This guy he's got a point he needs to make. Let's just take 5. Everybody shush. Give him a moment.
Let him explain.
To kind of gather it. Exactly. Yeah. And give him a moment to gather his thoughts and try and do that translation. Because when I went to France and tried to use my very limited French, I kind of realized, and we all do this, we don't think in that language. And that's why it's so very hard. We think in our language and translate. Yes. And that is the same in reverse. And I think we often forget that, is that someone from a non-native speaking, non-English speaking country is translating from his native language into English and then trying to put it in the right framework to then get it out of his mouth. Like that takes a bit to form. Yes. And if they're lacking in confidence, if they're graduates and they're not worldly and haven't been through 30 years or, worked on international
or maybe
projects
from a culture where you're not supposed to speak up as a young professional.
Yes. And absolutely. There are cultures where you don't challenge in front of people. That is also, and particularly in Australia, that is also a problem because everyone challenges everyone here. We call our best mates bad words and don't blink an eye about it. And other people are like, did he use that word? But I thought they liked each other. I was like, yeah, they do. So just reduce the complexity and make it easy to share, but be respectful and allow that space for that thought process to occur. Yeah. Because, if I were to try and think of, I had to read the map in Dutch when we were at the Netherlands. And I could read, a pretty good range of Dutch words by the time I left because I was immersed in reading the map and I had to figure out all these things. Thank God for the numeric system because that was much easier on the highways. Oh, yes. But again, I'm still translating. I'm not thinking Erst is west. I think I got that right. When I'm reading it, I'm going O-U-S. Ost is west. Okay, west is, which direction am I going? That way. It's not easy. And if it
just takes the 1.5 extra seconds to translate. And it takes 3 times the brain power, I sometimes think.
It does, but it allows for a much better outcome collectively if we just find the space to do that. Yeah,
so true. So very true. So your top tip for native and non-native English speakers is remove the jargon.
I think that's probably my top tip. Yeah.
If it walks like a duck and looks like a duck, call it a duck.
Exactly.
Yes. Becky, that was amazing. I know from our previous chats we can go on for hours, but we will do that in another podcast episode because I definitely want to talk to you about how you coach and teach and mentor women to step up and showcase their skills in the industry. And
I'd love to.
Oh yeah, me too. I'd love to. That's going to be another great podcast. Thank you so much. That was amazing insights. I know that my I always call them my engineers. I know that my engineers will love it. And that was it for today, my friends. This was English for Engineers. I'm your host, Olivia Augustin. Our guest today was Becky Paroz, and I'm talking to you soon.